Today we're going to talk about how to improve photographic color. We all use photographs, great tool to use, but we have to realize the shortcomings, mainly in value and color. Well, value, color, composition. There's defective parts of photographs and everything. So when we use them, we got to be aware of them. And I want to talk about color specifically today. So there's three images here. I want to look at these and talk about some color changes we can make that make the painting more effective, because we don't want to use photographic color. When I look at this, like these colors, they're just blank. I mean, there's some sense of a red violet to them, but they're too dark. It's like they're too opaque. Shadows need to be transparent, like we can see through the shadow to the color. And I don't see that much there, and I don't see it here either. So I want to add a little lighter value because it's too dark. Again, when the shadow gets too dark, it becomes kind of blank, becomes opaque, and you can't see through it. We want the shadows to look or appear transparent. So I want to add color and lighten those up a little bit. And one of the problems we have with photographs is we try and match the color too closely. I do like these colors. This warm, kind of muted red-orange and cool muted blue-violet there. But if I try and match it too closely, it becomes gray, it becomes more photographic looking. So what I like to do in the photograph, I can kind of zoom in or look more closely at an area like that. And if you're painting from a screen, a bigger screen, it's a little bit easier. But I can look at this color, and out of my peripheral vision, I see how strong this is, how strong the sunlit area is. So I want to mix colors that suggest that contrast between the light and the dark. I don't want to copy this. I want to mix a color that looks strong because I'm looking here and seeing the relationship between these two. And generally for me, that means painting a stronger color than what I see. So I tend to see photographs in terms of being too muted. Especially if we just stare right at what we want to mix, it's going to get very, very muted. So my changes here are keeping the color and values more simple. And these aren't the only choices you could make, but these are choices that suggest the light. Maybe more so than what the photograph does. Now I do look at this now and it's a bit too pink. I think I would warm it up just a bit. This is the equivalent of orange and alizarin crimson, or orange and cad red light, or cad red deep. And it's going to give me that strong effect. I could even slightly darken it. You can see it's just simplified more than what's there in the reference. I'm pushing the temperature in both areas, both in the shadow area in here and in the sunlit area. And I want to create more contrast temperature-wise and value-wise and keep it very simple. Same thing with the trees in here. The trees overall are fairly dark, so I want three values in the shadow. I want that deeper dark that's here, and then a couple of lighter darks. By the time the dark trees get up here, there's more light filtering through these trees, and it gets them a little bit lighter. Same thing here. I made the decision red-violet on these buildings and the wall. So a red-violet with a touch of orange in it, or yellow ochre in it to slightly mute it. And again, these don't match the photograph at all, but they do look like paint. And that's what I'm after. I want to mix colors that I know I can mix with the colors on my palette that suggest the light better than the photograph. And this thinking this way gets you away from the goal of just trying to copy the photograph. And what I'm looking at here in the two darker greens is a ultramarine blue and viridian with maybe a touch of yellow ochre or cad yellow light. I'm not using yellow ochre right now. But nothing wrong with using it. I just have dropped it for now. I might put it back in 6 months. But both ultramarine blue and viridian, and then some kind of yellow. Not much cad yellow light. That's really light, just a little bit. And then if I need to mute it, adding the complement. of cad red or alizarin crimson, either one. I'm keeping my colors more simple by keeping the values more simple and the shapes more simple. And then I'm mixing colors that I think work better than the photograph. What this does also is sharpen your sense, your own color sense. The more you do paintings where you don't try and copy the photograph. Photograph is kind of a guide, a place to start, but then become more familiar with your palette and know what you can mix and start using colors that are more related to the palette rather than just matching the photograph. I could, paint this 4 or 5 different ways using different colors, but as long as the values and the temperature is correct, it'll still work. And then in the shadow on the street also, it's a little bit stronger. So I've kind of raised the chroma, more saturated color, to get that sense of strong sunlight here and here. And I've also had more saturated color in here just because I want more color in the shadow. This color in the shadow here just does not work at all. These green colors are just kind of dead. A lot of black in there, and we're not using black, so don't try and reproduce what you see in there. Moving on to another one. And I'm not talking composition. A lot of these I would always want to crop first, like this one. I kind of like the long horizontal view, so I'd crop it somewhat like this. Really play around with the composition when you're working with photographs, because the camera sees it all the same shape, and the minute we do that, we come up, with, we're not thinking composition. That's back to just copying the photograph. So here we have, we know the light is coming this way. It's low, so anything standing up, like these cliffs, facing the light, is going to be bright and sunlit. It's going to be a light area. Then anything facing kind of up and this way is going to be more of a halftone. Still in the light, still being hit by the sunlight, but not as strong as those areas that are upright facing the sun. So that I have halftone, I have light, and then everything facing this way is in shadow or cast shadow from the cliffs. So I know I want 3 values, and what's difficult with this cliff is there's just so many dark and light values. Little value changes, several colors that we don't need. So what I want to do is just force everything into those 3 values, either a light, halftone, or dark. Shadows are always a lot simpler. I might have, for the most part, slightly lighter shadows back here and darker here. Now when I get to the shadow on this kind of flat plane, that's going to be a little lighter because of the grass and everything else. But everything being equal, if everything is the same color and value, which it isn't always, it's gradually going to get lighter as it goes back. So I don't want to make these darks as dark as they are in the photograph. I got to see my corrections if I just did what I said. So here's my light. And of course, but the computer here, I can't soften edges. I'd want to soften the edge between these lights and these halftones. I want to keep the edge hard between the halftone and the shadow, or between the shadow and the light. So where there's a big value jump, keep the edge harder. But if it's just like between light and halftone, or between a darker dark and a lighter dark, keep those edges soft. But between a dark and a halftone or a dark and light, keep the edge a little harder. And then things also get a little softer as they recede, so you got to interject that also. But this simplifies it, and I'm using colors. This is variations of orange and red orange. It's probably white and cad orange. That might be all I need for that. I could add a touch of alizarin if I want to knock it down slightly, but I don't think I would add, well, I could add a little bit of violet or blue, but not much. I want to keep the color more saturated, keep the chroma a little more high. And then a darker value in the halftone, but it's still in the light. And again, these edges would blend. I don't want them hard like that. And then a cool dark shadow. Again, a little higher saturation, in other words, a stronger color. Higher saturation, more saturation means stronger color, less of the complement, and less white to make it more muted. Of course, you have to have some white because I have to make it the right value. Saturated color means stronger color. Same thing with the greens down here. Now, to me, this is a yellow-green, cad yellow light, ultramarine blue, and then a lot of yellow-orange or orange. So it becomes kind of a yellow-green-orange. And that's going to give me that effect of that low light, which is late afternoon, early evening light is very orange. Of course, you have orange dirt and rocks here anyway. And then stronger saturation of color for these shadows. Now, I didn't mute things too much. You can always mute a little bit more, but that stronger color really makes the evening light pop real well. Now the last one here, this is in, the other two were in Arizona, southern Arizona. This one is in Missouri, and it's in August. Very hazy, very hot, and that real hazy atmosphere, the camera did not pick up very much. I do like the values. Values read pretty well. Sky's a little too light. But I like all the values. You can really see into the shadows here. See into the shadows on the barn. Maybe a bit too dark here, but not much. So the values are pretty good, but the color very dull. So I want to, again, deepen the lights just a little bit. There's too much white in them. So keeping a little more color, a little more saturation, a little higher chroma. And I'm going to increase the strength of the color in the trees. And again, I always pretty much start with blue and green. Or I'm sorry, blue and yellow to make the green, like the dark green here. Maybe add a touch of viridian to it. Be careful of that viridian because it's not a natural color. It's really strong. Now I use a viridian hue, which is really just phthalo green and white. So it's a little stronger than regular viridian, which I kind of like that. But be careful with it. It's very, very strong. So just a little bit of it increases the intensity of the green. And here, just cad yellow light and blue, maybe a touch of viridian, but not much. It's very, very green. So you can see also the background trees, I lifted them up a little bit. I might even lift them up a little bit more. Maybe lift them up higher, create more interest. But really a bluish, slightly muted blue to muted blue-green, but stronger than what I see there. Keeping these values simple, I have two values in the darks and the trees, and then I could have two values in the lights. I just have one here. But popping the color in the barns a little bit, I would probably block the barn in with a right value of a fairly strong violet, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and white with maybe a touch of ochre, but not much. Then come back with some ochre and alizarin crimson, or orange, or red and yellow, some kind of orange. A little bit lighter, wipe most of it off the brush and kind of scrub it in. And that kind of red, orange, and violet are kind of mute each other, but I'll have some areas of the violet showing through and some areas of the kind of red-orange showing through, and then other areas they'll mix. So that gives me about three different colors, three different variations. So I'm mixing, for this area, I'm mixing right on top of the canvas. I'm not doing a whole lot of mixing on the palette. I'm mixing up the violet, mixing up the red-orange, but I'm blending those two together on the palette. A little more violet down here. Make sure, though, you keep the value difference between here and here. The barn's a little bit lighter and the ground's a little bit darker. Squint. Even at photographs, you can kind of slightly squint. And when I do that here, I see the ground darker than the barn. But these are two different planes, so they can't be the same value. And then a bit more color in the ground. When you have ground like this, ground cover, that's just really busy. You can look at it and think, oh, there's just so much color in there, different values. Simplify it. I made it three different values, four different colors with the shadow. But in the light area, I made three different colors, three different values. And again, I can blend slightly, but don't paint everything you see in the photograph. That also kills the color. Too many value changes and the color gets ruined. So simple values, simple shapes makes easier color.